I'm going to talk a bit about TfL funding and the supposed crisis in funding at the present time. Obviously COVID has hit TfL's funding, but the real problem that TfL faces goes back a lot further than that. It goes back to the decision taken to accept the government's demands to operate with no subsidy and no government grant. This is something that no other transport system like TfL in the world is able to do. If you compare TfL with Paris, for example, about 30% of the Paris Metro's operating budget is covered by fares. In New York, about 47% of the New York subway's operating costs are covered by fares. In London, just before the pandemic hit, 134% of the tube's operating budget was being covered by fares. And what this means is that the fares paid to use London Underground were actually going to pay off historic debt, such as the debts that London Underground ran up during the disastrous attempt at part privatisation through PPP. If you look behind me here, this is 55 Broadway, and that was built particularly for London Underground as our headquarters. It's part of the heritage of public transport in London. Unfortunately, one of the first things TfL did to try and cover their costs was to flog that off to property developers. But it's now become clear that the main way they're going to try and address their financial crisis is by making us, their staff, pay. They're going to attack jobs. They're already holding loads of vacancies. They're not going to fill many of those vacancies. They're going to attack your pension. They've already announced that. They're going to seek flexible working. And what that means is you do what they want, where they want, when they want. TfL sold off its historic headquarters to try and raise money, but Parliament is being done up at a cost of about £6 billion of public money. So it seems there is some public money around for old buildings after all. The TfL crisis before COVID meant that they were looking to make cuts of £1 billion in their budget. Since the COVID pandemic, they're talking about making cuts of £3 billion. The Business First group have also estimated the funding gap going forwards at about £2 billion. But why is this? Recent data from the IMF suggests that Britain's GDP will return to the pre-pandemic level by the end of this year. So why do we need to make such cuts from TfL? £3 billion represents nearly 30% of TfL's total funding. There's absolutely no justification for that level of attack. But of course, Winston Churchill once said, never waste a good crisis. And that's exactly what the bosses are doing here. They don't want to waste the crisis of the COVID pandemic. They want to use it as cover to smash our jobs, our pensions, our working conditions and our pay. And we're not going to let that happen. We've fought for years. Members of the RMT and our sister unions have defended wages, pay and conditions on the Underground decade after decade. And we're not going to let that go to waste. So here we are outside the Greater London Assembly headquarters. This is where the Mayor resides and carries out his business. The Mayor, of course, is the chairman of the board of TfL, and RMT's message to the Mayor has been very straightforward all along. We've asked him to refuse to have anything to do with these cuts and to campaign with us for government funding. Unfortunately, he's decided to go on a different path and he's implemented the cuts. In fact, with some enthusiasm. In 2016, he said how he was going to cut the flab from TfL, but we were seeing what that meant in reality. It was the Fit for the Future programme. 953 job cuts they wanted to make. In fact, they paid voluntary redundancy to 953 people, but then ended up re-employing over 500 people for those positions after RMT took strike action, overtime bans and conducted a political campaign over several years. And we're faced with the task now of making sure that imposing £3 billion of further cuts on staff on London Underground is not an easy option for the Mayor or for TfL management. We're going to show them that it would be better for them to join with us and demand funding from the government rather than try and take it out on our jobs, our pay, our pensions and our conditions. So, we've been to Parliament, we've been to the GLA building, and now here we are with the people who really run things in the City of London. Of course, not everyone around here is on a huge salary. There's a lot of people in the finance industry itself and the various service industries around here on low pay. But there's 3,500 top bankers who share a bonus pool of around £10 billion a year. That works out to about 2.8 million each. Now, if you were to impose a 20% levy on that bonus pool, they'd still get £2.2 million each bonus on top of their salaries, but you'd also have enough money to completely wipe out the funding gap for TfL. I think that's something that's probably worth doing. Now, some people may ask why the bankers should contribute more towards public transport. Well, the answer to that is fairly straightforward. The City of London relies on public transport. It relies on public services like those provided by TfL to be able to make the money that it does for its banks and its businesses. But don't take my word for it. When the RMT took strike action in 2017 to win back 325 station jobs, the Evening Standard estimated that that cost £500 million in income to the London economy. Now think that through. That means that every time we do provide the service, every day when we come in and work as normal, that means we're creating £500 million of value for the London economy. That's about £28,000 for every single person every day you come in and work. So the point is, we weren't just essential workers in the COVID pandemic, we were essential to the London economy before that, and will be essential to the London economy after that. There is no justification for the attacks on our wages, on our pensions, on our conditions and on our jobs, and we're going to fight to defend them. In our next video, you'll be able to hear Steve Headley, the Senior Assistant General Secretary of RMT, who's also on the Board of Trustees of the TfL pension, explaining to you how the pension is not in crisis and there's absolutely no reason to be making pension cuts at the present time. And you can also look at our other video, which shows your regional organiser, John Leach, talking about some of the things that London Underground want to impose on us in each function in the name of efficiency, flexible working and a tax on your framework agreement. Watch the videos, but also get involved, attend your branch, keep up to date on the London Calling website, and get ready to fight alongside your colleagues. Get ready to support your union in any action that we have to take to defend our jobs, our pay, our pensions and our working conditions.